and hand it over to Lois Kaneshiki. I know most people know Lois pretty well, so I won't waste time with an in-depth bio. Everybody knows who she is.
Thank you, Rhonda. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. I haven't seen a lot of you in a while, and thank you for coming out and caring about education. Quick thing, I did leave something up here that I only brought one copy, and somebody took it, and I know it's a mistake, and you didn't know because I wasn't policing the station up here the whole time, but the top page, it was a few pages. The top page says SEL is white supremacy with the hug, has a picture of a black teacher on it. Somebody picked that up. Look in your papers. Somebody picked that up because it was right over here. Because I needed to reference those pages, if I can get those pages back. Are they already gone? Anyway, things happen. So I'm the Pennsylvania coordinator for Moms for Liberty. And Moms for Liberty is a 501c4, all right, thank you, Rhonda. It's a 501c4 organization that was started about 2 years ago by a couple moms in Florida who both had served on the school boards down in Florida, different school boards. And it was around the time, during the masking where parents were coming out and parents were seeing what was being taught at home during virtual school and all that, and things were going pretty haywire, and they started Moms for Liberty in Florida as a way to organize parents and to help them, give them a voice at their school board meetings, and that was why they started it. And then it just kind of exploded, and they never really intended it was going to go out of Florida, but now we're in 43 states. We have 270 chapters in 43 states, and they want to have a chapter in every county in America. So these ladies are working really hard. They're very dedicated, and I'm very proud to be part of that team and to help here in Pennsylvania. So thank you all for coming. We are looking for a new chapter leader here in Blair County, and we don't have chapters in the surrounding counties here. So that's something that I'm looking for, and as I'm going to hope to impress upon you, if I can, that everything that's going on in education, everything that we need to try to change, it's going to be hard for this to work in a sustainable way if we don't have support organizations underneath it, and if we don't have more people engaged. And that's the problem right now. That's the main problem, is we don't have enough people engaged, and so that's definitely needs to change if we're going to change anything. So I did pass out a handout. If you didn't get it, there's still a few more up here. It has the logo on top. It says what's going on in your schools and what you can do about it. There's a couple handouts. It's not from Moms for Liberty, but I got them because I'm also with Protect Child Health Coalition, which is a great organization. They deal a lot with the sexualization of children in schools and gender issues. And there's some information on comprehensive sex ed up here. I encourage you to take it. It's a big problem, one of the many problems. We're going to go through a few things. So I put together a presentation, try to boil it down on big picture, what is wrong, what is going on in the schools today. And it's a lot, but they're all related. I don't know if that's good or bad, it's all bad, so anyway. So the worst part of it, and what it all boils down to, is that education today is more about shaping attitudes, values, and beliefs than academic achievement. You have to remember that. Whenever you see what's going on in your school, if you see it in the news, anywhere, it's not about academics anymore. Right. Just forget about that, unless school boards do something about it. Okay. And we saw this with Common Core, but this has been going on way before Common Core. It's just now somehow everything is on steroids, it seems like. It's just hyper worse. But this has been a trend for now 2 generations, at least. Okay, that's number one. So we're not teaching, now we're molding attitudes, values, and beliefs. So everything that's important to you that you're trying to raise your children, they are trying to change that. counteract it and change, okay? Got to remember that. Then the second thing, the hypersexualization of children from very young ages. And there's a movie that I recently showed where I live. It's called The Mind Polluters. It's something you might want to show sometime. It's a really powerful documentary. But to really understand this phenomenon, you have to go back to Alfred Kinsey. And Alfred Kinsey, back in the 60s, I guess, he was researching human sexuality, what things people did in their private time, right? But there were other things about Kinsey that weren't highly publicized. And there's a website, it's called stopalfredkinsey.org or something. If you put that in your Google search engine, something like that, it'll come up. There's a lot of information on there. And Alfred Kinsey believed, and he did experiments on children with pedophiles, and he came to try to convince people that children were sexual from birth, and that this was normal. We should encourage this behavior and foster it from as young an age as possible. And he convinced the United Nations that this was the right thing to do. And so when you hear about things coming from the United Nations, this also is coming from the United Nations, all this sexuality, teaching children very, very young. Okay, so, and if you listen to James Lindsay under my recommended sources, James Lindsay covers all of this in great detail, and I've been listening to him for the last 2 years, and his podcasts are very long, but they're very worthwhile. If you listen to him, you will understand how and why all this kind of fits together.
Lois, what's his name again?
James Lindsay, and his podcast is New Discourses. It's on your handout on the back, New Discourses. But the purpose is to destabilize the children, because if you destabilize them, and if they're then at school, they will come to believe that people at school are the only people that care about them and help them, and it's to separate children. It's another method of separating children from their parents. And somebody said, I don't know where I heard this, but that Marxism takes 3 generations to install. And I was doing the math in my head, and I think we're in the 3rd generation right here. So in order to install Marxism, obviously you need to take away God, which they've done, right? And you need to break up families. Because if you break up families, you take away God, then the only place they have to turn to help them in life is the state, right? And then all they need is a crisis, and then they can pretty much get away with everything. And I know it sounds hyperbolic, and it may sound a little, but I'm boiling it all down because for the sake of time. But if you watch what's going on in the schools, and you think of it in those terms, it will start to make sense. And when you hear them say, we don't want parents to see what's in the classroom, and we don't want parents to see the curriculum, or we don't want parents to see this or that, well, why else would they not want you to see? So so we've got that education isn't about academics anymore, it's about sexualization of children at very young ages. And then we have restorative justice. So restorative justice, and to understand restorative justice, the book Why Meadow Died will talk about why there was that shooting in Florida and the whole background of that. It's not because people are gun crazy and we have to take everybody's guns away, right? It's because these children that are problems and are mentally ill are not being addressed. And if you know that story, everybody in that school, as soon as they heard there was a shooting, they knew exactly who did it. Everybody knew this child was a problem. The teachers knew it, the students knew it, everybody knew it, but nobody would do anything about it. Because restorative justice says that, well, you're all racist, right? So America's racist, and then all the punitive, the penalties in society, our justice system in general, it works against minorities. They are there's more minorities that are punished through the justice system, so therefore we have to not enforce any discipline, because if we do, we're going to enforce it wrong or poorly, so instead we just won't enforce anything. And if you hear about what's going on in schools, that's part of the problem. There's no discipline. The criminals are running the asylum, right? And that's part of the problem. It's not probably as bad here, although I don't know how it is in Altoona. It's much worse in the cities, but it's going on to some degree everywhere, and that's restorative justice. And in many of your school districts, they may have actually passed restorative justice policies. So that's something to look for. So the restorative justice is taking away discipline, it's creating, the lawlessness, and as you know, children in their upbringing, they need boundaries, right? They need to have boundaries set, they need to have rules, that you can't raise a child, a child isn't going to develop properly without boundaries and rules and having limits set, right? And the restorative justice takes that away. So that's another thing that is going on.
Lois, I just want to mention that if you're on school board, you're not going to have a piece of paper that comes in front of you that says, we're going to do restorative justice now.
It actually does. These policies actually do say restorative justice.
Lois, my point that I'm trying to make is just like CRT. There's videos out there right now that say, we can sell this, make money, as long as we don't use the title. So I'm not disagreeing with you, there may be policies out there that will use restorative justice. The only reason I'm interrupting is because I want you to be aware that you have to read the policies. You know what I'm saying, Carmen? It's not just the titles.
And then the fourth thing, I don't know why I don't have, I guess that's down there, okay, but the fourth thing would be the data mining. So right now, this is one of the worst things. This is something that parents can do something about now, and you must, in order to slow down this whole project, because they're using data mining of your children's attitudes, values, and beliefs in order to create profiles on them, personality profiles, profiles of your family, your household, so that they can target them, and it'll be an experimentation at first, but eventually they will get very good at it with artificial intelligence and other things, targeting them with messages to get them to believe what they need them to believe to forward this woke agenda. So it'll be targeted to your children based on the data they're collecting. So you have to fight against the data collection. This is really important, and this is something, the minimum that parents should try to do. So if I had my child in school, in public school, or any school for that matter, because this could be done in private schools as well, I would, in the beginning of the school year, or right now, you could do it and just submit there's a lot of forms online that you can submit that say you do not give your consent to any surveys being taken or any kind of non-academic questionnaires during school, whether it's online or on paper. And I would have your teachers sign it that they acknowledge and that they agree to abide by your wishes. I would have them sign it. That's what I would do if I were, and if enough parents do it, the more parents that do it, it'll be better, because the less data they can collect, the harder it is for them to get good at this, the messaging and the targeting, because they're going to need lots and lots of data to get it right. And right now the kids in school are kind of guinea pigs, as they have been for a while, but with the data collection and this messaging.
If parents submitted that letter and we got enough of them, you think that would hold the teachers back, because they wouldn't remember which student said not to fill that out and which didn't, and it might open them up to a lawsuit. If they did violate that, would the parent be able to sue them, or what would be the recourse there?
Well, that's a very good question, and we haven't really gotten to that point yet. You know, a lot of this is uncharted territory, I'm sorry to say, but if a teacher agrees, and I mean, I'm sure the teachers union would defend any teacher that mistakenly gave a child a survey, I mean, you got to start somewhere. That's all I have to say. I'm not sure what the recourse would be, but I would say start somewhere. And if you do, I'd like to hear from you if you try something, whether or not it works, and let me know how it went.
I tried it, got an attorney, and was advised by my attorney he would defend the action I was going to take, and it was a profile on a kid. And he said, there's one warning I'm going to give you, the unions are bigger than me.
Right.
So you won't find anybody in Altoona that's going to take that. I'll tell you right now, they won't do it.
Maybe if it happened enough, they could do a class action.
If you got enough
Right.
people together, that
Well, that's why, goes back to organization, what I was saying before. If parents work together and they're not alone, it's easier to do some of these things if you're not alone. You gotta work with other parents, you gotta work together. That's one of the purposes we have Moms for Liberty, to work together to provide that support system and just to continue making more connections, because there's power in numbers. There really is. So it's always hard when you're alone. But just, if you can get other parents to do the same thing, that will be helpful. But, I mean, what's our alternative? Sit and take it or pull your kids out. I mean, we got to do something. I don't have a better answer yet. So the data mining, and again, the data mining, the purpose of it is to figure out how best to communicate with your child to get them onto the woke agenda as quickly as possible, so they can be activists for the woke agenda. And this is what they're teaching teachers. And I'm telling you, this is the thing that scares me the most. It's not that they're just coming in and doing these things in the schools. Is that we know that teachers and administrators are already being indoctrinated. And I had this discussion with one of my school board directors. I'm in Cumberland Valley now. And I said, how are you, my school director said publicly he was against CRT. And he even said, over my dead body will they have CRT in our schools. I was like, his name is Bud. I said, Bud. I was like, you said that you were against CRT. How are you going to save the children if all the teachers are indoctrinated? How is that possible? Use your head. I mean, I don't know what these people think, but I'm going to tell you, a teacher told me they forced her in a 2 full day workshop, 2 full days. Okay, this was beginning of COVID, I guess. I have the PowerPoint presentations. I'll send them to anybody who wants them. They're 80 pages long, 80 pages of PowerPoint.
Lois, who forced her, the unions or the school?
Her employer. It was a diversity, equity, and inclusion or something like that. And so they walk you through it, and it's done very skillfully, and it's easy to see if you have people who are they're not political, they don't really know. You might have there's a lot of white people with white guilt. There are, right? You know that, right? I hope you know that. A lot of people with white guilt, and they would fall for this in a heartbeat because this gives them relief. It tells them what to do about it. Sit around in a circle and we share our privilege. You're laughing. This is going to be mandatory. There is going to be a bill in our legislature forcing professionals, all state workers, and healthcare workers, mandatory anti-bias training. That is CRT indoctrination. That's what it is. And they're going to make you take it every year. And you're going to have to keep taking it until you give them the right answers. It's just like 1984. It's just like the Mao struggle sessions in Mao, China, when they all sat around, they beat up on each other until they gave the right answers. And neighbors turned on neighbors, and children turned on parents. That's what we're up against. Yep. And everyone is behind it except the people. The entire education establishment is behind this. The federal government is pushing it. The military is behind it. The legal establishment is behind it. They're teaching it now in law school. They're teaching it in medical school. And I'll tell you part of what's going on, and I know I've heard this, and you'll hear people, I don't know if they're still saying it, a couple of years ago they were saying it, well, you know, this diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, we're just doing this to make them be quiet and sit down and stop bothering us. That's not the way it works, folks. They do not go away.
No.
They come back for more. You give them an inch and they will take your entire arm off.
Yeah.
You'll be lucky if they leave you with another arm. They do not go away. You can't give them enough. Because remember, the goal is to overthrow the system. Capitalism is the enemy.
Right.
Everything America stands for is the enemy. Everything that made our country great. You know, we sang America the Beautiful earlier, which, you know, it makes me almost tear up when I sing that song. But you wouldn't find anybody singing that in public school today. The teachers would probably gag if they had to sing that song. Because they are taught that America is the root of the evil. Everything in America, the greedy capitalists exploiting the workers, the imperialist land grabbers. And if you look at your history books that are in the schools, it's just everything, one story after another. How we abused and exploited every minority group, everyone for the benefit of the rich white man. Okay, and that's really all there is to it. If you read, I remember when I was reading the AP history book that they approved when I was on the school board, and I'll never forget. I just read the parts that I know where to look for the bias, because I'm a public school graduate, so my history isn't all that great. So I like to read the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and see how they frame all that. So it's all about, well, you know, we exploited the children and the factories, and the women, and then the immigrants that came over, and everybody's being exploited, and everything's horrible, and the greedy capitalists, and over again. And then there was one, literally, go back, you should go look at it. There's like one short paragraph, it's like one sentence. And it literally said, so they can't tell you they're not teaching it, because it was in there, it was one sentence. They said, the Industrial Revolution was the single most important factor in raising standard of living in the history of the world. One sentence. And then they went on to talk about all the exploitation. Like, do you think that sentence deserves a little bit more than like one sentence? Do you think maybe you should explore, what was it about the Industrial Revolution? What was it about some free markets and entrepreneurship and technology and the ability to solve problems because you have the freedom to think and act and do? But there was no discussion about that. And do you think that's an accident? I don't think that's an accident. And I told our curriculum director when we were voting on that book, which I voted against, I said, you know, even I didn't like our country after I read this book. I said that. They looked at me like looked at me like I was from another country. But you know, how can our children have respect for our history in our country if that's the way they're being taught? And I remember last year and a half ago when we were starting to work on this critical race theory stuff in the school, and a reporter called me and said, why don't you want to teach history? I hope you all know this has nothing to do with not wanting to teach history. I mean, critical race theory doesn't even have anything to do with history. It has to do with a worldview, right? It has to do with a worldview of separating black people and white people, separating them permanently, and seeing everything through race. And I remember a friend of mine told me back in 2016, I guess it was, this was back, yeah, that was 6 years ago, that the left had a woman, this was 6 years ago, going around the country training their activists how to use race to fight against everything. And she must have been really good, because they're doing a good job at that.
Yeah.
Because everything is racist.
Yeah.
Even, did you know math is racist?
Yeah.
It's racist to say you should actually get the right answer. Because it's just okay if you at least try, or you think about it and maybe show your work, but the right answer, you don't really need to get the right answer apparently. But I hope they don't think that when they're building the bridges or fixing the bridges. But critical race theory has nothing to do with race. It's using race to divide people. Because when the Marxists realized around, I think it was around the 50s, it was when they were developing critical race theory, when they got together in a room and they realized that Americans were not going to be divided on economics, the haves and the have-nots, because Americans believe that in America you can be better. That if you work hard and you exert yourself, that you can make something of yourself. And people and Americans believe that everybody has a chance to be financially better off and successful and maybe even, rich someday. That's the American dream, right? So he said, well, we can't get these people to buy into, enough people to buy into the economic end of it, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. So we got to use something else. And they came up with the perfect anecdote, right? It was race. So economic opportunity or economic status, let's say, right, was replaced by race.
You're seeing this become more and more prevalent in the culture. Because if we were to go another 10 years in the trajectory that we had over the last 10 years, we would have seen poverty dramatically reduced in the world. And the force that is leading the destruction of poverty is not a socialist force, it is a capitalist force. It is free enterprise, free markets, a hope for humanity to believe that they can make something better of themselves. And the people on the left that are putting these ideas into our culture have begun to realize that if they don't squash this capitalism thing, they're never going to have the ability to bring up about this global communist utopia that they hope to put in place.
Right. So I just want to, you can look at this later. I couldn't bring the whole thing, this training. This was part of the 2-day training. But this is the one page, when social emotional learning becomes white supremacy with a hug. That's right here. I was just hearing the latest James Lindsay podcast was saying that they're coming up with wave 2 of social emotional learning, which is going to be way worse. So that's something to look forward to. So, and here, color blindness is an act of erasure. So if you say you're colorblind, you're offending someone now. You're offending someone because now you're saying, well, your race doesn't matter. They want it to matter. That's the whole point of critical race theory. It does that it matters. You have to acknowledge that it matters. Okay. And so this I have a list. I have this like four page list of really small font of microaggressions. They had to teach all the teachers what all these. The microaggression is something that you would say that could offend somebody, so don't say it. Because you got to be really careful about offending people these days. It's a big problem. You're just going around offending all the time. So one of the microaggressions is if I say, when I look at you, I don't see color. That means that I want you to assimilate to the dominant culture. They're serious. They're serious about it. Okay. And the myth of meritocracy. If you say, I believe the most qualified person should get the job, that's a microaggression now. I'm telling you, there's like 4 pages of that. What are the knowledge and skills skills I need to become a threat to the existence of inequity in my sphere of influence. So they want to teach teachers after they realize their own white privilege and acknowledge all that. They want the teachers to think of themselves as activists for social justice and social change. They literally want them to think of themselves that way, and then the next step is to train the students from very young ages to be social justice warriors. And we saw this in Hollidaysburg a few years ago when there was a school shooting somewhere, horrible thing, but they had remember they had an anti-gun rally, a demonstration, the students, and so that's part of this. You see something, you take advantage of the situation, and you get the students to take some sort of action, to be activists. You want to train them to be comfortable in being activists. Think about, as conservatives, most of you are probably conservative, conservatives and liberals have different personality profiles, right? So conservatives don't like confrontation, they don't want to get in people's face, for the most, this is a generalization, but for the most part. So they are trying to train them from a very young age to feel comfortable with this type of activism. So they can all be put to work later, right? Against the bourgeoisie, right? So that's where it's going. I even saw this, unfortunately I was a Girl Scout leader for a long time, and towards the end we started to see this woke stuff come into Girl Scouts, and I even saw it in Girl Scout activities about training little girls to be activists, to go to local government meetings, to lobby for, fix the sidewalks, fix this or that. before children even understand how to analyze the issue, right? And what things cost, and how to get things done, how government works. They don't want you to know how anything works. They just want you to create chaos in the system. It's just perpetual upheaval. Because if you have perpetual upheaval, you have no stability. And that's the way you kind of destroy the system. So you got the critical race theory, you have to see everything through the lens of race. That's what you should think of when you think of critical race theory. It does have a definition. It's not like it doesn't have a definition. Some people say, well, you can't really define it. You can. It means you see everything through race. So it is in the schools. When they tell you it's not in the schools, it's not being taught, they're not teaching critical race as a theory, they're using it to inform everything else that they're teaching. And remember, we're not teaching academics anymore, we're teaching attitudes, values, and beliefs. Okay? And this is done through social emotional learning. So social emotional learning is now in pretty much all the schools. And unfortunately, the federal government has thrown a lot of money into this social emotional learning. The ESSER funds, which were put together during COVID, it was supposed to be to help relieve the schools from the costs they had during COVID, which I don't know what they were because nobody was teaching. So, so they got all this money, and 30% of it had to be used for social emotional learning. It was in the contract, 30%. So if your school got $2 million, that means $600,000 had to be used for social emotional learning. So where did it all go? There's a lot of people in education now, they're making a lot of money as consultants selling these social emotional learning. They're complete, they're like curricula. We just purchased in Cumberland Valley, Portrait of a Graduate. That's one of them. It's sold by Battelle for Kids. Some of the other ones are Leader in Me, Character Strong, Wit and Wisdom. There's a whole bunch of different ones. They're all, different stripes on the same zebra. But they have standalone programs, and they're also interwoven in every subject in every grade level. And that's the problem with the social emotional learning, is that it comes up in everything. And let me give you an example. And this is where it gets insidious. And when we look at curriculum going forward, and I'm trying to help have influence on, there's a curriculum transparency bill being drafted by Senator Jarrett Coleman from Berks and Lehigh, that area out there. He was actually on the school board, Parkland school district. And I think he's going to be one of our champions, I hope. And he's drafting a curriculum transparency bill, which it got passed last session, but it got vetoed by the governor. And apparently there were some things in the bill that were problematic, were not like worded well, that there's too many undefined parts, which they're trying to correct now, which is good. So one of the things we're going to have to see that I hope we get in this bill is that before we approve curricula, we need to look at the teachers' manuals and see what's also in the teachers' manuals, because these things aren't necessarily in the lessons, but it's how the teachers, how they deliver the lesson. So let's take an example. Let's say it's math class and we have a word problem, and Jimmy and Johnny are going to the amusement park. And it's 30 miles to the amusement park, and they've already driven 15 miles. So how many miles do we have still to go? So, and that's a pretty straightforward word problem. So, how many of you have been to the amusement park? Some students raise their hands, some haven't. Oh, well, why do you think that? Some people have been to the amusement park and some people haven't. The teacher would be asking this to the students. And the students would be thinking and say, well, you know, maybe this or that. And eventually somebody says, well, maybe they can't afford it. Oh, well, do you think that's fair? What do you think the 7 or 8-year-olds are going to say to that? Is that fair? Come on. No, it's not fair. No, it's not fair. Oh, you don't think that's fair? Oh, well, what do you think we should do about it? You think we should do something about it? You think we should help the children who haven't been to the amusement park? Do you think the people who can go maybe should help the people who can't go? Can you imagine a conversation like that with 7 or 8-year-olds?
Yep.
Don't laugh, because this is what social emotional learning will be doing. And every conversation is going to be geared back to the same thing until the children are used to thinking of everything in terms of, you know, something they're not ready to think about.
I'm 52 and how long ago?
So you can see how a conversation like that could go a little haywire. And especially how it's directed by a teacher.
Ms. Kaneshiki, is it okay if we just burn down the amusement park?
Maybe.
In other countries.
So James Lindsay basically, he defines social emotional learning as the practice of psychology on groups of children in uncontrolled, non-therapeutic spaces by non-professionals. It's a broadcast psychological manipulation of children in classrooms. And the example I just gave you would be the type of example. And you can see how for young children it'd be really easy to get them to coach them in giving you a certain kind of answer. Some of the phrases that you're going to see in your school materials, even school board members, when they're being sold some of these programs, they're going to see phrases like competency-based learning, student-centered, transformative, generative, culturally responsive, liberatory education, systemic inequity, and those are all code words for Marxism. Okay. Now, does that mean that all the teachers are Marxists? No, I would never say that. I don't think they are. I don't think all administrators are Marxists. I don't even think all the people selling these SEL programs are Marxists. I think there's a huge problem with everyone is kind of drunk to Kool-Aid. And it goes back to what's going on in the education schools, right? What's been done for the past, since about 1984, and it goes back to Paulo Freire, and you'll learn that with James Lindsay, but he wrote a book, The Politics of Education, that is basically in all the schools, and that's what everything is modeled after. And it's about how education must be to push people towards social activism for social justice. And that's what they believe. Everything is for towards social justice. And the joke, though, is, it's not a funny joke, is that we never will have social justice, we'll have tyranny. Because in the end, Marxism, you can't have Marxism. You have a totalitarian dictator, and then you have the political class, and then you have basically destruction at the bottom, and that's all, just like China and Russia. And of course, China does have a big middle class now because they have incorporated some, quasi-capitalist into their economy, but it's still totalitarian, and there's no freedom. So if you're part of the political class, you get privilege.
Lois, isn't that the same thing? I was born in Germany, okay? It's the same thing. It happened over there. And
Yes.
that's why the German people are good people, but they were dramatized
Yes.
to do the wrong thing.
And when people are afraid and scared, they are
That's right,
much
and
more
that's-
likely to accept a dictator.
And people don't have guts here, then it's going to be the same
That's right.
thing.
There's one, I had a recent school board meeting. I was the only person it was a curriculum meeting in Cumberland Valley. I was the only person there from the public, and my jaw almost dropped when the IT director admitted that there were 279 apps, websites, and programs that teachers were using that were unauthorized, that were not approved curriculum. And not one board member blinked, and I was like, you gotta be kidding. He had a spreadsheet up on his PowerPoint, like, holy crap.
People don't talk.
So
People are afraid.
I did a right to know request, and I did get the list, but there's all kinds of resources out there that are being provided to teachers from various sources. And it could be the Department of Education, could be a lot of other places. I mean, it's everywhere. And one of the sources, and I don't know if this was on the list, but it's called Newsella. Has anybody heard of that? It's N-E-W, I think it's S-E-L-L-A, but they make it look like it's a newspaper, but it's not. It's fake news. But it's written like it's like news articles. And the teachers will sometimes print out these articles and give it to the kids as supplemental things in classroom. And one of my friends showed me that her 11th grader was given an article. It was about Nazi Germany. And literally it said this, I didn't bring it with me, but it said, they're talking about Hitler, and Hitler wanted to make Germany great again. And they used that phrase, and you know that wasn't an
That's what he
accident.
did. Yeah, her.
Hitler wanted to make Germany great again. Yeah, that was just special. So, there's little things here and there, right? It's not necessarily really overt. Sometimes it is overt, but it's not necessarily. It's little things here and there, putting little germs in their minds, and it all accumulates over the years. Yes, sir.
On this whole subject, it is overt. And a good book to get a grasp of that is Eric Metaxas's book on Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And it will outline exactly the process the National Socialists went through in Germany. This is a social and emotional engineering that's taking place. It didn't start really with Marx. It started with a man by the name of Nurchayev. And Nurchayev developed a whole series of propositions to deliberately infiltrate the church, education, in order to destroy the family. So all of this is endemic. It's involved in the schools on the local level. But where does it really start? The Marxist communists following Nurchayev ended up in Frankfurt, Germany. And they got out before Hitler, who was competing with them, took over. And they came to the U.S. and they went into the universities and took over the universities.
Yes, that's right.
Educational philosophy. I mean, where do you think the Weather Underground people that got into Chicago education came from? And then they begin to engineer emotionally the teachers who graduate from the universities. So you have a inverted pyramid scheme that has been going on. So yeah, it's got to be addressed at the local level. Fortunately, my son is a teacher and tells me, Dad, we still sing God Bless America every morning at the school that he's a teacher at. So it is happening in some schools where they are still emphasizing the traditional understanding. But as Lois is pointing out, in so many other schools, it's being subtly inserted. Very intentional. It's not something that's happenstance. It's coming from the top of the pyramid, and they take a long view of this. They are in no hurry.
Right.
They've been working it, and the intention is to destroy the church, because that's where the moral foundations come from. You don't get moral foundations from playing soccer or baseball or other kinds of activities. You get it from going to Sunday school. But in the Altoona area, we can't even get Sunday schools together because they got sports on Sunday mornings.
That's right.
And that pulls away the parents, the grandparents, and everybody else, and pretty soon you don't have the culture that teaches the 10 Commandments and all of the basics. And then the schools engineer that further in that kind of curriculum that Lois is describing. But I wanted to point out, it's more than just at the local level. It's really at the university level where this starts. And to get into a university as a professor, if you're conservative, you might as well be whistling Dixie in the wind. You're not going to get in. Only these woke professors get in, and they are the ones who are nurturing them, the teachers, the lawyers, everybody else at the top of the pyramid, and that's what's infiltrating and destroying our culture and our America tradition. So you need to understand it's a very wide kind of thing. Another book that Eric Metaxas has just come out with that I recommended to Pushback, and I recommend to everybody here. Eric Metaxas, it's a Greek name. Metaxas is a wonderful historian, and he just has written a book called A Letter to the Christian Churches. And that book is emphasizing that the pastors must stand up in the pulpit. That's what they did at the Revolution.
Right.
The Revolution started because the Black Robe Brigade preached from the pulpit.
That's right.
The basics that emphasize individuality and freedom and liberty. And that's what they're trying to destroy, as Lois is accurately pointing out. They're trying to obliterate that and make everybody march like sheep. And it's time for everybody to realize that, people. Because we got to either do it now. I'm getting old. It doesn't matter so much for me, but for my beloved children and grandchildren and generations to come, I better stand up. And everybody else better stand up too. Before they get what they want, and maybe they've already got it, but a few of us are going to say no. And I'm a Lutheran, so I like that. He stand ich. Ich kannst nicht du anders. Gott help mir. So here I stand. I can't do otherwise. God help me. God bless America. I picked that deliberately because Kate Smith was tarred and feathered as being a racist because she sang a black spiritual type of song, and so they got that out of Philadelphia. But I grew up listening to her sing God Bless America, and then Moon River too. But that's what I wanted to say, Lois, that it starts at the top of the pyramid, and that's the professors.
Right.
And they're engineering the social understandings and the emotional understandings of the teachers, and then the teachers, the students, and on it goes. And-
Well, if the teachers survive their undergraduate education, they're going to continue with continuing anti-bias, anti-discrimination, CRT indoctrination until they give the right answers. And they want to do it to all of us. This isn't just in school. They want to do, as I explained to you with that bill that's coming through the legislature, they want us all to have this anti-bias, this CRT indoctrination. So, and everything that Pastor Roy said is correct, but we still have local control of our school boards. And school boards adopt curricula and policies. And school boards can say no. They do not have to adopt any of this. So you have a say. You vote for your school boards. You have an election this year. You have half of your school boards are up for election. Your school boards have 9 people. You have at least 5 up for election. In some places, more than 5 up for election. And you need to find out who is running and are these people that can stand up and not be intimidated by people with a PhD in education next to their name, because a lot of things happen on the school board that are done to try to intimidate school directors and make them think that, you don't know, we're the experts, just trust us, and they like to say, just trust us. But you have to use your common sense, and if they're speaking in education gibberish, you have a right to have it translated into human speak. But in the end, the school boards adopt curricula and they set policies. They do not have to adopt any curricula they find is unsuitable, which is why I voted against many textbooks in Hollidaysburg. Unfortunately, I couldn't convince my colleagues to vote with me, but I still voted, and I made arguments against those books. They were written. I had even requested they be submitted as part of the permanent record, and I was even refused that courtesy. So I still have kept them if anybody wants to know. But one of the things that we also need is, as I was talking about before, one of the first things is transparency. And I thought when I moved out to Harrisburg that it was a law that you had a 30-day mandatory review period for new curricula because we have that in Hollidaysburg. And I just assumed it was a law. And then when I got to Cumberland Valley, they were just adopting stuff, and I was like, wait a minute, what happened to the 30-day review period? And then I was looking through the school code, and I couldn't find anything. It's not the law. Don't tell Bob Gilday that. But your school board can adopt that mandatory 30-day review period. It's not against the law. If it's not against the law, you can do it. You need to provide transparency so people have an opportunity to look at these things. Yes, Rhonda?
Would the school board vote that in? Say that they're...
The policy?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, they could do that. And then you still have to, we had to go to the district office to look at it and everything, and I was willing to do that, but it's not enough. You'll also need access to the digital, now all the textbooks come with digital supplemental materials. They all do. We need access to those too. That's hopefully will be in this new bill that they're writing, because that's where a lot of the problems are. If you've seen problems in your schools, it's with these supplemental materials a lot of times that come home, something that they might have on their apps or their Chromebooks that's not in the regular textbook. That's where they sneak it in. We need access to all that stuff before we buy any programs. And we need help. We need people from the community to come in and look at this stuff and help us go through it, because you can't put that all on one person's shoulders. I'm not going to be for the rest of my life going to school board meetings reading all this stuff. So we do need help with that. But we need transparency. We need transparency with all this curriculum, everything that goes in the classroom. There's no reason why the school district can't post all the curriculum that's going to be at the beginning of the school year, that parents can see the curriculum before the kids start school. Why can't they do that? Post it online. These are the materials, and if you want to come see them, just make an appointment to come in and see them or something. But all that. Also, another way to get around, teachers bringing in weird stuff from online is that if they're going to use a supplemental resource, it has to be approved by a department head in advance. That way, there's a second set of eyes, and you have somebody else that you can blame if there's something really weird in the classroom, like teaching a first grader that the doctor's only guessing at the baby's sex when it's born. he doesn't really know, right? Which is in the first grade materials in Cumberland Valley. So we need transparency is just key. During one of the new school board members I know in Elizabethtown, she got involved because during COVID, there was something on the teacher's wall, and she saw that she had a question about, I can't remember what she saw, but she wanted to see, and she asked the teacher, I want to see everything on your walls, and the teacher wouldn't show her. Like, she wanted to see what the teacher had up on her walls. And she kept going back and forth with this teacher. It was like a big drag down fight. Why, if you were a school teacher, why would you deny a parent the ability to see what do you have in your classroom walls? So, I mean, it seems like little stuff, but it's obviously all there for a reason. Parents are in the way, right? Parents are in the way. They teach administrators and teachers this, that parents are in the way from implementing the program. That parents stand in their way. And that don't share things with the parents if you don't have to. So unfortunately this is being taught, but it's not right. And school boards can adopt policies to give parents more rights and to create more transparency and the ability to get in there. I think we should also have policies in writing that allow anybody who wants to come in and observe classroom, come in and observe classroom for a few hours. If we had people doing that, it would also help if we had cameras in the classroom. Aaron used to say he wanted cameras in the classroom, and I was like, I don't know, but now I'm totally sold on cameras in the classroom, because that way you could really see what was going on, right? But in the meantime, and I had to get my clearances in order to go in and do that, unfortunately, but if we could just go in for a few hours, if you went in once a semester, right? If you got a group of parents going either in the morning, I like to go in the morning because I figure, the morning is when kids are going to be sharpest, and that's the greatest time for actual learning. I want to see what they're doing in the morning. So I like to go in the morning, from morning till lunch, and see what they're doing there. And that would be good. That would create more transparency there. So those are things that school boards can do. They can do it right now. We don't need Harrisburg to do anything. We don't need the federal government to do anything. 5 people on the school board could do this right now. Why can't we get that done? You can do right to know requests to get more information. You should read your school board agendas and go through there, and it's not fun reading, but I'll tell you another instance I just had in Cumberland Valley. When this policy is being adopted in school boards across the state, it's a threat assessment policy, and it just puts into policy the protocols for how to deal with any kind of threats that come into the school, which I suppose is a good idea. But they snuck in there that they have to do anti-bias training every other year or every year, I forget, for all threat assessment personnel. And I caught that, and I was like, that ain't flying. So I went to the school board meeting, and I spoke about that, and of course the superintendent chimed right in, because when they have cover from state law, they love that. And he said, oh, we have to do that, it's in the state law. And sure enough, our legislators passed that in a budget bill, that they had to do this. So I said, okay, so you have to do it. But the law doesn't tell you what kind of training, it just says anti-bias training, okay? That could be anything.
That's right.
So I said, all you have to do is add one more sentence in that policy, subject to board approval. Because now what we have transparency, right? Yep. Now anybody can see it. That's what we want. We want to see those trainings. Do you think I could get one board member to make a motion on that in our supposedly Republican Cumberland Valley School District with Republicans bragging about how conservative they are? Does that sound familiar? Couldn't get one to put that forward. One simple fix. Didn't require rewriting a policy or going against the law. It was very simple. So I wasn't very happy about that. So, and this policy has been adopted many, many, many school districts, and they all just go ahead and they rubber stamp it. I don't think they even know what that means, anti-bias training, but I hope you know what it means. And I hope you tell your school board members what it means, because it means this crap. So that's, yeah, so the opting out is really important, trying to stay on top of what is going on, a curriculum, adoptions, social emotional learning programs, all this stuff. We need transparency on, we need to see what it is before they're putting it in our schools. So,
Lois,
that's really, the bulk of what I needed to tell you tonight. Yes?
I want to get your take on, recently, Governor Youngkin in Virginia, we know, is making a move, but recently, Governor DeSantis put a bill through, and he's really doing a lot of work in the area you're talking about. In fact, he put $1 billion aside to pay teachers. I'm curious how that's going to work. I'm wondering about what's your take on everything he's doing with, the Black studies, that whole big recent craziness that's going on? And
This is all I have to say. I think the sound President DeSantis sounds really good.
it does, doesn't it?
He's the best governor in America as far as I can tell. And a governor like that, a fighter for the people, who can articulate what he stands for and is willing to defend his position and defend the people, to defend rights of parents and defend the children, that's okay in my book. We need more of them. Where are the people in this country who will stand up for what we need? I mean, the people in Florida are very fortunate, and I think we're fortunate we have one state that's trying to get it right. And it's a big, important state as well, so I'm very grateful for Governor DeSantis. Yes, Richard?
Lois, I just have one brief remark and one question. But first, I want to say thank you so much for coming out and speaking about Thank you so much for the tireless efforts and sometimes thankless efforts that you put into the school board here in Hollidaysburg. It was enormously inspiring to many of us and still is, and we miss you. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard.
First, just on critical theory, it's important to understand, and thank you so much, Pastor Lloyd, referencing the history, and he's not exaggerating in the slightest. But it is important to focus on